Hello and welcome to The Week That Really Was with John McGurk and Sarah Ryan for this week ending the 31st of October 2025. It's been a very busy week. It's dominated by post-election fallout, which is what this podcast will be dominated by as well. In other news, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is no longer to be known as Prince Andrew or Duke of York, so royal titles have been falling, but I am joined, as I always am, by a woman who will ever remain the queen of this podcast. Sarah Ryan, how was your week?
Nice, John. Very nice. All right. Yeah, it was kind of it was an interesting week politically, and lots of people who listen to this podcast listen or know me, so they'll know that my very dear friend Joe Barnes died this week, over the weekend, very suddenly. He's a barrister, so anybody in legal circles would have known Joe, but as I said to you before, I have a habit, or a few of my parents' friends, like people that I grew up with, that I knew my whole life, who are friends of my parents, I kind of stole them. And Joe was one of the friends that I stole, who really became my friend and encouraged me in everything I did, encouraged me to go back and become a barrister, encouraged me in life and everything. And just was, anybody who knew Joe, there's a piece about him in The Independent today, knew that he was a kind of a larger than life character. Amazing barrister, amazing friend, great guy. And I was in court with him last week and he was fine. And unfortunately, he just died very suddenly over the weekend. So absolutely ever about that. But anyway, life's not fair.
No, it is not. It is not. Well, my sympathies to you and to Joe Barnes' family and to everyone who knew him. I actually didn't know him, but I knew him by reputation as an excellent lawyer, and I'm very sorry to hear that. Anyway, life unfortunately goes on, as it will go on when I one day keel over, and when you one day keel over. Life just must go on. So we must continue with the show and talk about the title of the show, which is The Week That Really Was, which has only been dominated in Ireland by one story, which is the fallout to the presidential election. 200,000 spoiled votes, 900,000 votes for Catherine Connolly, something of a humiliation for Fine Gael and Heather Humphreys, and fallout all around the place. For Micheál Martin, for Simon Harris, for immigration policy. If one Fine Gael councillor gets his way, for people who spoiled their votes, who are no longer going to get their benefits. And of course, there's a Galway West by-election, which will now have to happen. So we'll talk about all of that. But I will start, Sarah, by asking you because for one reason or another, we had hoped to do an emergency podcast after the results last weekend, and we just couldn't make it work. So just give me your reaction to the Saturday that happened just a week ago.
A lot to unpack there, isn't there, John? Well, I happily went down and spoiled my vote with a large red marker, despite, and lots of people who listen to this podcast won't actually be on Twitter, so I'll say what I said on Twitter. Despite being told that it wouldn't matter, wouldn't count, no one would notice, would be tossed to the side with no consequences, was undemocratic, would make no blind bit of difference to the election, and nobody would care, I still did it. Me and 999,000 other people. And I feel very vindicated, to be honest, from all those comments, because it has made a difference. It has been noticed. It's the largest amount of spoiled votes in any election in Europe ever, as I understand. There's consequences happening in Fine Gael. There's consequences happening in Fianna Fáil. There's consequences happening in the political discourse. Consequences for things that we were told would have no consequences. So I think that it was amazing. I think that Irish people used democracy bluntly, but used the tool of their vote to send a message. The message was loud and received. Whether it has long-term effects remains to be seen. But I think Micheál Martin's leadership is in trouble. I think Simon Harris is coming out, we can get to this later, changing his position on immigration as a result. I think there's consequences everywhere. I think it was brilliant. Great. I stand by my position, which was that I thought Catherine Connolly was going to win regardless. And myself and lots of other people refused to be bullied into voting for somebody we didn't want to vote for just because there was nobody better.
I think I was thinking about this during the week, and I think it's funny, the reaction to it. I mean, first of all, I'm not going to play it down, because I often get myself in trouble on this podcast by playing things down or being too pessimistic. I think it's obviously a huge statement that 200,000 people went out, as I did as well. and spoiled their votes. I wrote joke election on mine, which it was. And did that. That is an enormously significant statement. And I think a lot of people who were thinking about staying at home came out and spoiled their votes. But what strikes me about it, because Kevin Cunningham from Ireland Thinks, who I always say on this podcast is, to my mind, Ireland's best and most interesting opinion pollster, went out and did a poll on the day. Wasn't an exit poll, but he did a poll of people who had voted and asked people who had spoiled their votes, basically a series of questions about who they were. And I mean, it's not really surprising who these people are. They vote for Aontú, they vote for Independent Ireland, they vote for independent candidates, they vote for smaller parties. They were annoyed about the lack of choice. They were annoyed about the shutting off of Maria Steen, of whom about 70% of them would have backed Maria Steen in the election, which would have put her on something like, I don't know, 10% in an actual election, just on the basis of people who came out and voted. Obviously, she would have got more if she was in the election, but that's a strong
Actually,
base.
in the election. Yeah.
Do you know what I think, though, is just my reflection on it, is that those people have always been there, and they've been voting in election after election after election, and they have been heard this time. They've actually been heard. Why have they been heard? Isn't it ironic, Sarah, that the first time these people have actually been heard is when there was no candidate representing them? Because what we've seen happen in election after election after election is that 13% of people comes out, right? And their vote is split 17 different ways. Some of them vote for random independents. Some of them vote for Aontú. Some of them vote for Independent Ireland. Some of them vote for Mattie McGrath and Tipperary. Some of them vote for Michael Lowry and Verona Murphy. And it ends up that, there's 1% of the vote here, and there's 3% of the vote there, and there's 4% of the vote over there, and everyone can ignore them. And the politicians who are supposed to represent these voters actually often dilute their voice. And it is only when they had no candidate on the ballot that they were able to come out and speak with one clear voice to say, actually, we're a pretty contiguous group. We have pretty contiguous beliefs. There are various things we want. They're not being delivered by the politicians. And here we are standing en masse as a group. I think politicians on the so-called right of Irish politics have a lot of thinking to do about this. And I think there's 4 years now until the next proper election, by-election will come to. And, we simply can't go into another election in this country with that vote being divided 17 different ways. Just can't happen. That's my thinking.
Yeah, but the problem is that you can't you have all these different, so the by-election will be a good litmus test for how that might work. Independent Ireland have a very good candidate there, Noel Thomas. Now, Independent Ireland have, frankly, made a show of themselves over the last few weeks by voting confidence in Simon Harris at one point, saying that spoiling your vote was undemocratic before the election, and just have an unbelievable ability to not capture the mood of the people on any issue. I think the great white hope there is Ken O'Flynn, and I saw today Ken O'Flynn coming out and saying that he was revisiting his vote, reconsidering his vote of confidence in Simon Harris, when Simon Harris has finally come out and stated the obvious, that immigration is a problem in Ireland. He finally, Rip Van Winkle, I called him on Twitter, he finally woke up after calling people racist.
I think that's unfair to Ken. I have to say, I think that's unfair to Ken. But because, political parties, this is the other thing.
No, I'm calling Simon Harris. I'm calling Simon Harris Rip Van Winkle.
Oh, I see. Gotcha. Oh,
sorry,
yes.
I'm
yes,
saying
gotcha.
Ken O'Flynn came out today after Simon Harris, or Rip Van Winkle as I'm calling him, has finally woken up and realised that there's a problem with immigration and that there's too much immigration in Ireland. After gaslighting and calling people racist for 2 years, absolutely ignoring communities across Ireland who were saying it's a problem. Now that 200,000 people spoiled their votes in an election, he's suddenly woken up and realises. So I'm pleased to hear that Ken O'Flynn is reconsidering his vote of confidence in him. But I think in Independent Ireland have made... I've said before, there is literally doesn't seem to be anybody in Independent Ireland who's doing any thinking about strategy. They need people behind the scenes, smart people. They clearly don't have any, who are saying, this is the position we're going to take on this. The position they were going to take on Maria Steen was that they had to have about 19 meetings to consider it, and then they decided at the last minute to back her. They didn't. They came out at the last minute in the 2 referendums and advocated for a no vote right at the last minute. They came out. Michael Collins came out last week and said that people who spoiled their vote were undemocratic. Nonsense. So the only hope in Independent Ireland is Ken O'Flynn, but they do have a good candidate there, Noel
Thomas.
Thomas. Thank you. But the question is, are all the other independent, like, is Aintu going to are they going to put multiple right-leaning independents are going to run in that by-election as well and just dilute the whole thing? That's the question.
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, I'll just deal with some of the stuff you said there because I think some of it's interesting. Look, Independent Ireland are, I think there are two clear political vehicles which, people can and should choose between. Independent Ireland on the one hand, Aintu on the other. Neither of them are perfect. Both of them, in fact, are deeply imperfect. I would say of Aintu, for example, that Peadar Tóibín is a great and decent and honourable politician who has always acted in accordance with his principles. I am not always sure that his principles and mine, for example, would align on a whole range of issues. I also think that, and I've said this in public, I'm not attacking them, I think that at times they've been too cautious on issues like immigration and what have you, and too careful to stay very mainstream on some issues where it might have served them better to be a little bit more radical than they have. That's Aintu. And then the Independent Ireland, you've set out the issues with them there, but the issue with Independent Ireland is that they don't know as yet whether they want to be a political party or a collection of people who take state money to boost their constituency operations as independent TDs. It is very clear to me that the only way that organisation will ever grow and have a national impact is if there is a change of leader. There's one obvious candidate to lead the party. You've named him. I think that I think that the path to political success for those people who listen to this podcast and broadly agree with you and I, Sarah, on a whole load of issues, is for those two parties to get the right leaders in position and actually formally say we're in a transfer pact. We don't agree on everything, but we agree on immigration, we agree on crime, we agree on all this woke stuff, we agree on protecting free speech, we agree on, put your list of 10 issues where you agree and say these are our principles which we share and we're recommending that people transfer, but here's where we disagree and you can choose between us for your first preference. And that's what they should do, but it requires Independent Ireland to have the correct leader. And I think that person is quite obviously qualified.
And I think that in fairness to Peadar Tóibín has shown consistently that he is collegiate in terms of, he was the one who set up the caucus for Maria Steen. He's the one who's more open to working together. And it feels very much like to me, like that there's a childishness within Independent Ireland about working with other people.
Well, at the top of that party. At the top of that party. This is the thing, because you're looking at the Galway West by-election. And I'm looking at it. I mean, obviously, Gript is politically neutral, but obviously I also, as an individual citizen, as somebody who thinks it would be healthy for our democracy for the government to be pulled in a non-woke direction, I think it would be wonderful and amazing in the very unlikely event that it happened, that there could be a kind of a populist conservative winner of that by-election. The only person on the field, or likely to be on the field, who is capable of pulling that kind of victory off is Noel Thomas. That's a statement of reality. Yeah. Whether you like Independent Ireland, whether you don't like Independent Ireland, whether you like Aintu, whether you don't like Aintu. Aintu got 2.1% there at the last election. Independent Ireland got 10%. The independent vote in total was about 28%. The problem is in a by-election, for people who don't understand how this works, it's the same as the presidency. It's a race to 50%. There's only one seat, so it's a race to 50%. The more votes you get on the first count, the longer you're in the election, the longer you can benefit from transfers. You can hope maybe to stay ahead of the Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael candidates and get their transfers and win the election, because their vote would be divided between the two parties. But that strategy will not work if there are, as I fear there will be, 16 dudes putting their name on the ballot paper to go, I'm here to stop woke, and I'm here to stop immigration, and I'm the National Party, and I'm the Irish Freedom Party, and I'm Aintu, and I can't believe it's not the Irish people, and so on. Like that's a load of nonsense. If that happens, but, hand the seat to Sinn Féin now.
But the problem is, John, and I can understand this, is that I think Noel Thomas is a really good candidate, and I've met him before, and he did really well in a general election, and he's a super candidate. And if Noel Thomas is the candidate, I think there's lots of people, including those, as you say, who listen to this podcast, who'd march their way down to Galway to help with that campaign and get him elected. The concern that a lot of people are going to have is that whatever about Noel Thomas personally, I'm not really interested in wasting my time canvassing for somebody to get a seat in Dáil Éireann so that they can vote confidence in Simon Harris again next month. Like, what's the point of that?
That is true, and those are questions that the party leadership of Independent Ireland will have to answer.
But I know, I mean, you're right that there's different things, and Aontú have some things I don't agree with and whatever. But I know for a fact that if Aontú got another TD, I know what I'm getting. And one of the things I would have gotten is, for example, another vote for Maria Steen, or another vote, a position on this and a position on that. And I certainly wouldn't be getting another vote for Simon Harris. So I think Independent Ireland need like a bit of clarity about who they are and what they stand for. And I think that whoever's idea it was for them to vote confidence in the Taoiseach that is extremely unpopular at the moment should be gotten rid of.
Well, that is a matter internally for them. And obviously, Gript Media does not endorse candidates in elections. It's up to people to make up their own mind. But I'll tell you one thing, no one's going to win if there are 22 candidates on the ballot all saying the same thing. And we've seen that happen before. And I think I wrote a piece for Gript during the week saying, this is a maturity test. I think it is a maturity test. Like your political movement is building and building and building. It has its setbacks. We had the local elections and the European elections and the general election last year where we went through this farce of, there being basically a quota of votes in most of the European constituencies for a candidate from a kind of a right-wing perspective. And only one seat was won, and that was won by Kieran Malooly, who promptly hopped over and joined the Liberals in the European Parliament. So, and then the general election, that kind of error was repeated. So I think the Galway Bay Galway Bay. It is kind of Galway Bay. It's Galway West by-election is a good test to see what will happen there. Anyway, we kind of got into that topic earlier than I sort of wanted to, because there's a lot more to talk about. Let's talk about Micheál Martin, because I'm starting to think you and I should get our you're the author of the phrase, but I've insisted on using it all the time. We should get our "You're Doing Nothing" t-shirts printed, or "You'll Do Nothing" t-shirts printed. Is this it? Is poor Micheál for the chop this time?
Well, so initially there was talk, Micheál Lahan, I think, was reporting that there was signatures being taken and all that kind of stuff. And then later on, it came back that they were deciding to wait until the end of the investigation and report into what went wrong with the selection of the presidential candidate for Fianna Fáil. And then I read a report where there was a quote from somebody within Fianna Fáil saying that they would, give Micheál time to leave, around the end of the presidency of the European thing. Like, guys, seriously.
That's June 30th next year.
I know. Yeah. So, in other words, on his own terms when he feels like it. If you're not going to get rid of Micheál, when Micheál can go on Claire Byrne and play the sad story about how he feels really like it appalls him, the idea that he's top-down leadership, and do all that kind of performance and say whatever he likes. But the truth of the matter is that anybody who's been involved in Fianna Fáil in the last 14 years knows that Micheál is a top-down leader, does rule by a small cabal of people that are around himself, has his favourites, and that's just the truth. And the idea that the lads would start to move against Micheál and then sit back and say, we'll wait for the investigation into the mess that was the presidential election by a committee that Micheál selected, it's just embarrassing. I mean, it's just, to go back to the analogy we've used before, it's like the girl who won't break up with her boyfriend, gets back with him every weekend, complains to her friends, but now he's actually just like wearing the face off a girl in front of you and you're still taking him back. Like, it's just mortifying. Like, you'll do nothing. Shut up. This is just pathetic. Like, the whole election was a complete farce. Like, no matter what reformation of words that people want to use, Jim Gavin was Micheál's candidate. Micheál was the one doing the calls. Micheál made the decision, and people were told in no uncertain terms that that was the person they should vote for. It's not a coincidence that all the cabinet voted for Jim Gavin. Do you know what I mean?
But if I was a Fianna Fáil backbencher, I'd be asking myself a bigger question here, which is, like, because it's all focused on the presidential election. At the end of the day, the presidential election doesn't really matter. Catherine Connolly is not. I mean, we barely talked about Catherine Connolly on this podcast. She's now the president-elect. She'll be the president. We'll wait and see if she decides to be a quiet president or to spend all her time saying crazy shit. It could be one or the other. But, either way, it won't really matter except at the margins, unless she says really crazy shit, then it might matter. But like, if I was a Fianna Fáil backbencher, I'd be looking at the government as a whole. Went to the polls last December, whenever it was. We had an election. Was it November? I can't remember. It was almost a year ago. And you got voted back into government just about with, I think, an increase of 10 TDs, which was not as a result of the vote increasing, but as a result of kind of the vagaries of there being extra seats added, the way our PR system works. They got a bounce. But my question is, what on earth have you done in your first year in government? I mean, can anybody watching this podcast, and I know some of you are Fianna Fáil backbench TVs, by the way, can you hand on heart say, can you name one big initiative that this government in its first year, when it will never be more popular or have more political authority than it has done? Because to me, you've kind of sat in your arses for a year and done nothing except, there it is again, done nothing. Except kind of like move some money around in the budget, make the rest of us all poorer, and kind of oversee economic decline. There's been no major legislative initiative. There have been a couple of things by ministers. You might say Jim O'Callaghan has marginally increased the number of deportations and kind of gotten a little bit tougher on immigration at the margins. We might say that the housing minister has kind of like made a few noises here and there. But by and large, in terms of big legislative initiatives, there's nothing that this government has done. Am I wrong? What do you think in there?
Nothing stands out. No,
there's nothing. There's nothing.
There was a lot of focus on international stories. Let's be honest. There was a lot.
You spent the year talking about Gaza.
Yeah.
That didn't really have any effect at all, one way or the other. Whether you think it should have or whether you think it shouldn't have had, it had no effect. There's a lot of kind of focus on the European Union's trade deal with the American administration. Ireland had no real impact there either, except at the margins, if at all, and possibly more impact there than on Gaza. But in terms of actual domestic stuff, there's been no major legislative reforms on housing, no major legislative reforms on health, no major legislative reforms anywhere. We've just had a year of Micheál coming out, moon touring to the nation, making the odd statements, and hoping that things don't get too much worse. If anyone, by the comments are down there, if anyone thinks I'm wrong, say it in the comments. And I don't, by the way, I know you're lining up, you're typing it right now, you're typing it. You didn't mention all the bad shit they did. Right? I take it as read that you think that they did bad stuff. I'm talking about anything actually, any notable change that they have positively tried to make to the country. I haven't seen one.
Well, look, they were busy. Micheál was busy sourcing a candidate for the presidential campaign, so he was engaged with that. That went well. I think the question is, what will change from this presidential campaign in Fianna Fáil? Early indications were that I knew that people were extremely angry even before the election happened. I don't think many people in Fianna Fáil predicted how high the protest vote was going to be. The truth of the matter is that Fianna Fáil people can talk all they like about Micheál and 14 years and how bad Fianna Fáil was in 2011 until now. But the truth is that the party numbers, and the same goes for Fine Gael, but I'm just going to talk about Fianna Fáil for a second. The party numbers are in decline. The party is now unable to doesn't have the numbers to form a government with anybody but Fine Gael. So the party has done worse percentage-wise in nearly every election. The mentality, the atmosphere or the mood in the party is worse than I've ever seen it before. There's no direction. There's no actual identity. The identity has been diluted down. The idea that Micheál Martin was publicly saying that he was going to vote for a Fine Gael candidate is completely absurd and outrageous. And the idea that the fact of the matter is that Micheál Martin, or Fianna Fáil under Micheál Martin for 14 years has chased, types like Una Mullally down the road for their vote, chased after them, trying to make Fianna Fáil into something that people like Una Mullally would vote for. And the truth is that people like Una Mullally and lefty kind of woke people have about 10 other options to choose from and are never, ever, ever, ever going to vote for Fianna Fáil. And the fact is that Fianna Fáil has alienated for years the likes of me, the likes of you, the likes of other people who could who could vote for Fianna Fáil, but who aren't going to vote for a Fianna Fáil, that won't say what a woman is, won't take a line on immigration, won't be hard on anything else, won't look for value for money in large capital projects for the state, will waste money and will go along with Fine Gael and chase after Labour voters and others like a gobshite. That's the Fianna Fáil that's left today. And the truth is that people who are smart in Fianna Fáil and who actually have something to offer, like Jim O'Callaghan. Jim O'Callaghan has only been Minister for Justice for a short period of time because he was on the sidelines for a long time. And the reason why people like that are on the sidelines for a long time is because Micheál's a petty man who doesn't like people who are smarter than. So
No.
I'm just calling it like I see it.
Okay. I'm
think Jim O'Callaghan is a smarter man than Micheál Martin.
Well, perhaps less cunning. Intelligence manifests itself in different ways, doesn't it?
Okay, but Jim O'Callaghan should have been the minister. Jim O'Callaghan should have been the Minister for Justice before the last year. He's been a backbencher for a long time in Fianna Fáil.
Okay, well that is true. I'm not going to say anything mean about Jim O'Callaghan.
It's not even about that. My point is that that talented people within Fianna Fáil didn't come forward. Micheál has led the party, had his favourites, had promoted people. He made Norma Foley Minister for Education on her first week as a TD. But Jim O'Callaghan, my point, I'm using it to demonstrate. I'm using it to demonstrate the fact. I'm using it to demonstrate the fact, John, that Micheál has his favourites, and you had to go along with whatever Micheál wanted Fianna Fáil to be if you wanted to advance anywhere in the party. That's demonstrated in multiple people, not just Jim O'Callaghan. And that's gotten the party to 20%, an absolute shit show of a presidential election, a party that's in decline, and a membership that are more alienated than ever. Well done. Lads, if you are listening, it's time to take out the knife and get the job done. Okay?
All right. Okay. You've said your piece. I was going to say, just coming back on your piece, just on because I think the interesting thing on Micheál Martin is the assertion that he's rescued Fianna Fáil. Fianna Fáil's last 5 general election results. Last year, 21.9%. The year before that, in 2020, 22.2%. 2016, a massive result, 24%. So, since 2016, basically, in each of the subsequent elections, the party vote has gone down. And then before that, his first election leading the party, 17%. So if you take the 17% he got in the first election when he led the party to the 21.9% he got last year, basically he has increased Fianna Fáil support over the course of 14 years by 5%. And in the election before he took leadership, of course, under Bertie Ahern, Bertie Ahern's last election, they got 41%. So the idea that Fianna Fáil have been saved by Micheál Martin has always seemed like a bit of a stretch to me. It's based around one election, the 2016 election, where they did reasonably well. It's their high point. But basically over the 9 years since, they've lost support in every electoral contest that they have entered. But my big question with the Fianna Fáil thing stuff, Sarah, is like, who do you replace him with? I see one candidate who I think could improve that party, and that is Darragh Cleary. And and that's only assuming that Darragh Cleary actually decides, no disrespect, Darragh, if you're listening, but actually decides to be himself rather than, the kind of imitation of Micheál that all Fianna Fáil ministers have been forced to be.
That's not fair. That's not fair. Do you think Darragh Cleary? I don't think that's true. I mean, Darragh Cleary is the one who...
I'd like to hear more of what he actually thinks. I mean, this is the thing. I'm looking around Fianna Fáil and going, who has a different vision? Okay, tell me, who has a different vision? Darragh Cleary is the only one I can think. This is a compliment to him. He's the only one I can think might have a slightly different vision.
Okay, I'm sure he does. But the point is, that's my point, is that in order to get ahead in Fianna Fáil, the Fianna Fáil that Micheál is so horrified at the idea that he has a top-down leadership, in order to get ahead, you have to keep your mouth shut.
Yes, that is true. And they all have.
So for all we know, there's a centre-right, anti-immigration, pro-life, Christian conservative messiah in amongst them in there.
No.
That we're just waiting.
No, there ain't. There ain't. And I'll tell you why there ain't. Because if there was somebody who held to those kind of convictions, and I don't expect in the current political environment anyone to come out and be, for example, pro-life. I don't think it is for the regular. I know there are some people for whom it is very important, and my own credentials, I think, on that cannot be impeached. But I don't expect people to be banging that drum. But I think if there was somebody of deep convictions, they wouldn't have decided to put their head down, vote against all things they believe in just to get ahead in the hope that one day after Micheál Martin's done his massive liberal thing, they can come in as leader and reverse it all. I just don't buy that. That's not what happened in the Fianna Fáil of ages past. If you look back at the 1980s in Irish politics and what have you, there was holy war. I mean, the Progressive Democrats exist because Desi O'Malley, a liberal, got essentially forced out of the party by Charlie Haughey because his vision was so different. The Albert Reynolds versus Charlie Haughey battle that ended Haughey's leadership was quite vicious. Before that, Jack Lynch was assailed by plotters and people with a very different political vision to him. Not only what you might call a different tribe, but a different actual political vision for where the country could go or should go. That's not there. There's no one in Fianna Fáil who's willing to be. I mean, Desi O'Malley was willing to get kicked out. And he did get kicked out. There's no one in Fianna Fáil who's willing to get kicked out. I'd have much more respect for somebody who said, I'm not going to take the advancement. I'm going to sit on the back benches. I'm going to say this is what Fianna Fáil should be, but it's not. I'll cast the vote so I don't lose the whip, but I'll speak out against them. I mean, I've been very impressed by this young lad, Albert Dolan. Have you come across him?
Well, John McGuinness does that. Yes, I have. He's very good.
Yeah, I'm probably cursing him now. Probably if I wanted to see, this is where if I was a more strategic person, I would probably not curse young Albert Dolan by having the editor of Gript Media say he's doing a great job. But he's doing a really great job. I mean, with the public finance stuff, with asking the right questions, with being a thorn in the side of ministers at the committee, kind of doing the stuff that the government backbencher should do. I mean, he's too young, I would imagine, to be elevated to the leadership, but definitely too young to be elevated to the leadership. But there's somebody showing signs of life inside the party in a way that none of these candidates to replace him have ever done. You're looking at candidates to replace him, and you're looking at Jim O'Callaghan, you're looking at Dara Cleary, you're looking at Dara O'Brien, and then, I mean, I don't actually think there's a woman in Fianna Fáil with the profile or the authority. So you can't even throw in a token woman to be the next leader, because for all Micheál Martin has said, I'm going to promote women for the last 10 years. He's done a very poor job of promoting.
Only the right type of women.
Well, there's some very nice people in there. Anytime I ever met Catherine Arda, I thought she was a nice person.
Catherine Arda is a nice person.
There are also some people who have no business. I mean, Lorraine Clifford Lee, I mentioned a few minutes ago on this podcast, has been appointed a senator for 3 consecutive elections. Appointed a senator. She has run in every general election since at least 2016 and possibly before that, and lost every one, and not by a small margin. And she keeps getting appointed back to the Senate. I mean, you talk about promote women. I mean, I think it's insulting to just say any woman will do. You've got to try and promote talented ones. But Micheál has always been afraid of talented people. That's the reason his party's in a mess. But it's paid off for him. It's paid off for him because one of the reasons backbenchers are so slow to knife him in the back is because there's no obvious talented person waiting in the wings.
I think in order to reignite energy back into that party, a change of leadership just has to happen. There's no other way around it. At this point, I'd take Jim Gavin as leader of Fianna Fáil, to be perfectly frank with you, John. Just get on with it.
All right. Look, okay, we've talked enough about this. We're half an hour into the podcast. We better move on and talk about the other party of government, because Simon Harris, who, you know what, can I just say, I was mildly miffed this week that his statement about how there's too much immigration into the country and we've got to crack down, we've got to get people out of the country, we've got to speed up the deportation process, was covered widely in the media. And I didn't hear anyone in the media saying he was responding to a question by Gript's Ben Scallop, which he was. So poor Ben, broke one of the biggest political stories this week with his questions in Taoiseach that no one else asked, and didn't get the credit for it. And I just want to formally give him credit here, because fair play, Ben, for doing that.
Fair play, Ben.
Then there was kind of a bit of a fainting fit, wasn't there? Kind of the Irish Times ran a piece today suggesting that Simon Harris was morphing into Nigel Farage. I think in fairness they were quoting Gary Gambit and the Social Democrats, but
Aon rang in from his trip from his stint in Brussels to say it was disgraceful, dangerous language. But look, anyone with half a brain sees that it's stating the obvious finally. And I think that I was tweeting about it earlier on, just saying that even though on the one hand it's good that somebody is finally waking up and admitting to something that communities and people in Ireland have been talking about for a few years now, it's also just really, really annoying to hear him state the obvious, that there is a problem with immigration in Ireland. People have been upset and worried about it for years. And the government and government TDs and people in his party have been calling them racist for years. And now he's just saying, oh, yeah. Like, it's just mystifying. And now they'll his lemmings, all the lemmings will fall in behind and act like they've always thought this. And sure, it's in the common sense. But they're just cowards. Sorry.
Can I just come back for a minute to that insufferable moron O'Riordan, who is, obviously Dublin's MEP in Brussels. And you mentioned it there. Well, this is what he does. And I will never figure out how the rest of the media let him away with it. This is what he does. Anytime somebody says something he doesn't like, he rings up and he says, this is very dangerous language and it's very dangerous. And like, at which point you have to ask the question, okay, is there a way of expressing the political sentiment I wish to express in different language that is acceptable to you? And there isn't, of course. I mean, he's actively trying to say that you can't express your feelings, because if you can't express your feelings, they can't be heard. They don't exist. So what it doesn't matter what. I mean, what Simon Harris said was the mildest possible way of saying. I mean, I've been saying for years that the simplest way to communicate the problem is essentially, in a single sentence, immigration into Ireland has been too high for too long. There you go. That's it. And that's essentially what Simon Harris said. You don't have to get into all this nonsense about race and all that sort of stuff. You just don't have to. It's immigration has been too high for too long, which is a sentiment a lot of people in the country feel.
But the playbook for years has been that they say you're racist because they can't say that you're right. So it's just racist. Yes. Aon O'Riordan is like the absolute poster child for like, everyone who disagrees with me is a racist or Hitler. Like, it's just kind of like childish. I've done no thinking. Everyone who disagrees with me is bad. And as I always say, I'm the goodies and everyone else is the baddies. And I'm going to say so. That's pathetic.
I don't even mind O'Riordan. I mean, O'Riordan's an idiot. That's fine. I mean, God help him. He can't be helped. It's the media who let him get away with it that bothers me.
Oh yeah.
Like it's literally anti-intellectual. I don't like your language. What is it? What is it that Simon Harris said that, in your view, is racist? First of all, and second of all, is there a way to express the sentiment that Simon Harris expressed in a way that is acceptable to you, Aidan? How would you, if you were Simon Harris, express that sentence?
But that's the playbook, Don. The playbook is, I say there is a problem with immigration, and Aon will say, I don't like the word there, and I don't like the word problem, and I don't like the word immigration. And all the time, and everybody who's listening to this knows that all these programs, be they TV programs, political programs, radio programs, whatever, the slot only has enough time. You only have a certain amount of time to talk. And so he'll waste down the clock talking shite about the word immigration and the word problem, and he doesn't like the language, because that means that he never actually has to address the issue. Is it right or wrong, Aon? Is there a problem with immigration in Ireland? Is there? Do you think it's working really well? Is it going well? And he'll never have to answer that, because he'd be like, well, problem, immigration, like it's just words, hurty words. I don't like the words. So never have to deal with the issue at hand.
The other thing is, I have to be careful here in case he decides to get comfy with his solicitors and send off a ridiculous solicitor's letter. So I'll simply say this: my personal experience has been that he doesn't like debating. So I am aware of 2 occasions where I've been invited to be on a program with him, and he has pulled out when he heard that I would be on. Now, he would, of course, say that he doesn't share a platform with fascists and Nazis, and, which, of course, is defamatory of me if he were to say it. But he doesn't like doing that. And I've never heard him really in a debate with somebody who is actually going to really properly challenge him. I can't remember whether Niall Boylan was actually in a debate head-to-head with him last year in the European elections.
Yeah, he was. Not head-to-head, but group in a group.
Oh, yeah.
And the entire debate was taken up by, every time when immigration would come up, Aon would just do that exact thing to Niall, which was like, why are you saying that word? Why are you saying that word? Why are you saying that word? Instead of actually talking about the issue at hand.
Yeah. And like, I think he could be quite easily taken apart in a debate. But knowing that he doesn't do debate panels, and knowing that he doesn't like being on with other guests, what really annoys me are those radio hosts, and they know who they are, who defer to him and refuse to challenge him and just decide to let him waffle on. It's a real problem in Irish media and Irish democracy in general is media who, by the way, turn into Rottweilers the moment somebody like me is on, or the moment somebody like Mal Boylan is on, most somebody like you are on, turn in like Rottweilers. What did you mean? How could you possibly say that? I think of Kieran Cuddihy, who loves kind of defending the NGOs, but you're going to defund concern. No. Well, maybe actually. Maybe I might defund
Why
concern,
do you hate
but
the GAA? Okay, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. As it happens, by the way, I don't think the GAA should be state funded. I'm sorry, I don't.
I know we've had this conversation before, but the point is that when people are talking about the state spending on NGOs, they're talking about the fact that there is hundreds of NGOs for the same things. Surely a consolidation of some of them would work better, streamlining things so that more money gets to the root problem that they're supposed to be addressing. Those kind of things. That's what people are talking about in NGOs. There shouldn't be 45 NGOs for the same thing. So that's the kind of thing. But if you say there's a problem with NGOs, they go, why do you hate concern? Okay.
Anyway, I kind of sidetracked us there a bit with my Éireann O'Riordan little chip on my shoulder. Simon Harris, I mean, look, we got a text in our group chat this week from somebody who looked at that kind of Nigel Farage headline and said that's all it will take now to scare Simon Harris back to the middle ground, as it is in Ireland, which is quite left wing. And I suspect that is true. I mean, first of all, the government can't solve this immigration problem because the government has no understanding of the problem at source. So the first thing if the government want to solve the immigration problem, the first people they have to take on are you guys. You people down the four gold mines, because a lot of the problem with the immigration process is that you come here, you get rejected, then you have an appeal, then you have to wait for that appeal to be heard, then maybe you have a judicial review, then maybe you have an appeal to the European courts, and before you know, 6 months have elapsed. So if you want to actually solve the immigration problem, what you've got to do is make it a whole lot less lucrative for the law firms and little group of barristers who do quite well out of immigration cases. And what you do there is you in my view, you've got to set up a dedicated court to deal with these cases and deal with them at the equivalent level of high court, with maybe one quick right of appeal to be held within 6 weeks, and then get people out. Irish governments have persistently refused to take on the law library, and I think they will persistently refuse to do it this time. So you can't solve the problem. And the second thing you've got to do is actually enact quite strict border controls, which they're also not going to do. So Simon Harris is, once again, his mouth is writing checks that his ass has no intention of cashing. You can go on, defend the old barristers there.
No, it's nothing to do with barristers. It's to do with whether or not what I'm wondering about is whether or not Simon Harris goes back into his box. I think that the 200 spoil votes has scared the shit out of politicians.
Good.
I think that a lot of those, I was kind of bemused and slightly depressed at the amount of radio programs and different programs that were held over the weekend and in the aftermath of that election, where a panel of people who all voted for one of the mainstream candidates discussed why they thought people who spoiled their votes were on, without actually having anybody who might be on that mindset on to discuss it. Now, there was a couple in the last day or so, but for a while over the weekend, it was just like a group of people talking about terrible, terrible, awful, and isn't it awful? And then selectively picking the maddest, you ever notice this as well? Picking the maddest spoiled votes with the most unhinged stuff written on them to talk about that. Like, this one is so horrible and racist, instead of like tens of thousands of Maria Steen ones, or, like just picking the most unhinged one to talk about. So I think that there's definitely a level of surprise and sort of spooked, and that's why Simon Harris is doing that.
I broke my rule. Will
it change anything I do?
I flicked over to RTE television for a moment during the election count on Saturday morning, which I never do. But I just flicked over to there. Yeah, I did. And there she was, Alison O'Connor, in all her glory, was there on the panel. And Theresa Reedy, who seems like a perfectly nice woman, but definitely comes from a particular political view. Anyone who reads her articles in the Examiner will know what that view is. She described the spoil votes as coming from an element that threatens democracy itself, in an article for the Examiner later on in the week. And then they had that chap, I can never remember his name, has a very high opinion of himself. He's a professor in UCD. Aidan O'Regan, one of those things. And the three of them there, and they were there discussing the spoiled votes. And the three of them, like plain as day, voted for Catherine Conlon. Plain as day. vote for Gertrude Canning. And they were being interviewed by David McCullough. I have no idea who David McCullough voted for. I suspect Catherine Connolly, but I don't know. And they were there trying to discuss these people who spoiled their votes. And it was like three blind people who blind from birth, trying to describe a zebra. That's what it was like. Well, I know it's black and white and it's shaped like a horse, but like I couldn't draw one because I don't really know what a horse looks like. That kind of thing. That's what it was like. It was utterly kind of, on the one hand, hilarious, and on the other hand, the people who run RTE should be embarrassed about the lack of interest they have in a good, 10 to 20% of their country.
But also the lack of interest they have in having, like, what baffles me is that when you get like smart people from differing views on a panel, it's interesting to watch. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's smart people who are on the left, smart people on the right. You get them in, you have a conversation, a debate there about why people spoiled their votes by somebody who was able to articulate that well. There's any number of people. I mean, David Quinn was on one panel and he did a really good job of explaining why voters were abandoning Fine Gael, and he did a really super job. But smart people arguing two opposing sides of an issue is really interesting to watch. So I never understand why RTE seem to have no interest in doing that. They want to have the same people on over and over again. Their viewership is falling, and they don't seem to have any interest in having smart people debate things. I mean, to be fair to Virgin Media, they're having this dinner party show that has Ben on it and a number of other people. That's kind of an interesting concept. People from completely differing views having dinner and debating out some of the main issues of this country. So I don't understand why RTE isn't interested in that.
Oh, I do.
And go on.
Well, I think
they're afraid that people will hear something they agree with.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's also to do with media dynamics and competition. So one of the things that happens is if you look at that David Quinn clip, this is the clip of David Quinn debating with Emer Higgins about, whether Fine Gael represents people. And there's an argument between the two of them. And it went mega viral on TikTok. Or if you look at, and I'm not making this about me, but if you go back and look at some of the clips of me on Virgin Media's Tonight Show, or who else was on there a couple of weeks ago who had an argument on the Virgin Media Tonight Show? So people go on and they have an argument, and it's always like 3-on-1, and the one conservative person goes on, but there's an argument. Those clips go mega viral on every platform, not only on Twitter, they also go viral on Blue Sky and other platforms because people engage with the argument, they engage with the debate, they want to see it. And that is what drives engagement and people wanting to watch the show. But there's no pressure on the people who run those media outlets for people to actually watch their shows, right? There's no, because, I mean, first of all, RTE is guaranteed by the taxpayer. It doesn't actually have to have viewers. RTE is a television station for whom viewership is entirely optional. I mean, they like having them because it helps their advertising revenue, but it's optional. So they're allowed and they have the freedom to focus on the thing that actually matters to them, which is making sure no one in the country gets dodgy ideas. So, they are opposed to having a free debate because the wrong people might win it. And they're not kind of commercially forced to have a free debate because, they don't need the viewership figures.
They're not worried about bottom line.
Yeah, that's why Virgin Media and News Talk and the commercial radio stations tend to be a little bit better, but they're also now guaranteed by taxpayer guarantee. They're getting fixed amounts of money every year. So the people who are producers, and most people who are radio producers, you have to remember, are people who've gone to university, who are interested in politics, who are interested in current affairs. They tend to be liberal because those are the people who go to university and emerge from university. If they weren't liberal when they went into university, they're liberal when they came out. I did a debate, by the way, in UCD a couple of weeks ago. I must talk about it on the podcast at some stage. I mean, it was frankly terrifying. It was debate on free speech. I must talk about it on a later podcast. Because colleges are producing people of a particular worldview. And I think unless there's real pressure on them to produce content that engages the audience, they will just produce content that is politically safe from their point of view. And the entire media is infected with it.
And that's why we end up with such shallow kind of views and not very well thought out, or politicians who get elected without developed ideology on anything. Except for Sinead Gibney, although I saw Sinead Gibney, who paints her nails for Palestine. She was tweeting this week. She's another TD, by the way, who automatically has comments turned off on all her tweets, which is always a good sign. And she was tweeting this week about her attendance at the Women in Sport Awards. And you just have to laugh. It's like parody. She's attending the Women in Sport Awards when she thinks that Barry and John and Michael and Paul should be allowed to play the sports with the women, and couldn't care less about what that might be doing for women in sport. But she'll paint her nails and go along, and then she'll be on the radio tomorrow talking about the importance of hate speech laws. What?
The other thing, though, is with a few minutes left, I want to end on this note, because the whole podcast we've been talking, Sarah, about people of your view and of my view, and I haven't remarked at all on how utterly depressing and scary it is that Catherine Connolly got 900,000 votes, and that Sinead Gibney is an elected TD, and that Ed O'Riordan is an elected MEP. I mean, I don't think you can ever forget the sheer scale of the support for this stuff in the country, the institutional support, but also, frankly, the support from a huge swathe of voters, an enormous turnout of voters. I mean, Ben wrote an article during the week pointing out that the total number of left-wing votes in this election was basically the same as the last one. If you added Michael D. Higgins and Leah Rita, the Sinn Féin candidate in 2018, you basically got the exact same vote as Catherine Connolly got this time. But it's still an enormous vote.
Mm.
And you know,
but that's all of the. I mean, I don't think that's all of the parties supporting her. I mean, the spoiled votes was more votes than the Soc Dems and Labour got together in the last general election.
That is true. But it is still an enormous hurdle to overcome. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, the right will never win an election in Ireland on that scale, because that left-wing voter bloc is there. It is huge. It is motivated. It comes out. It is absolutely enormous. And so if you beat them, you're beating them sort of 52-48. You're not beating them 70-30.
But I don't agree with that, John, because you're talking about two elections. Leonie Rita should have never run against Michael D, and that was a completely nonsensical election. Ridiculous. Do you know what I mean? And this election was two candidates. Are you telling me? So you're assuming a left-wing ideological position on every single person who voted for Catherine Connolly. And I think that she ran a campaign against one other candidate, Fine Gael candidate, who had a very poor campaign. She wasn't challenged on any debate. And there's no way of knowing, but I'm almost positive that in a campaign where Catherine Connolly was actually taken to task by somebody who ran against her on some of the issues or some of the positions that she holds in a robust way, a lot of those votes would have been lost. That's the way campaigns run. I mean, she virtually ran unopposed. She ran as unopposed, as close to unopposed you can run without. It was like the equivalent of Michael D running with only one person. She ran as close to unopposed as you can get. The Fine Gael campaign was a joke. She was out of the traps on her own as the sole candidate for the president for basically the whole summer. In every debate, she wasn't taken to task on anything in any serious way. Come on.
There you are, white pilling me again. No, I was just a little bit black pilled on it all, because I sit here and I look at, we're having this podcast and we started by talking about kind of like independent Ireland and Aintu and how they should work together and all the rest of it. And then you have Éoin O'Riordan, who's an MEP and is an absolute moron. And I think the majority of people in the country think he's an absolute moron. He still got elected. You've got your aforementioned nail painting automaton, who is, an elected TD. In the country, and there are voters who go out and vote for this stuff. Paul Murphy is an elected TD. Ruth Coppinger is an elected TD. There are an awful lot of people out there who are either stupid and vote for this stuff, or who sincerely, genuinely believe it. And either one is a massive problem for our democracy. Massive problem, because that vote is going to be.
But these people are organised and they've been working for a long time. I mean, Ruth Coppinger has been knocking around, moaning about things since 1916, John. Do you know what I mean? These people are as old as time. So they're, people who are centre right are of that view and have to get organised. That's about what we talked about at the start of the podcast. They're not intellectual titans that you need to overcome. It's just about organisation.
No, they're not. No, they're not.
It's just about organisation. I mean, just to finish, because I wanted to bring it up and I forgot and now I've just remembered. Gript ran a story this week which just shows you what you're up against and how you shouldn't lose heart, about how the Irish Department of Infrastructure has had to remove an engraved metal sign outside the building after it was pointed out that it misspells the word infrastructure.
Infrastructure, that's what they wrote on it. Infrastructure.
Infantile. Infantile. This is comedic and depressing at the same time. I bet you that how much did that cost? That brass thing.
We have sought comment, and it has not been forthcoming. So we will seek it through freedom of information. And hopefully when we apply for the freedom of information, we'll get the emails from one civil servant going, "You idiot! That's not how you spell infrastructure." But
it's a large sign. Maybe they could prop it up with two wooden stakes and make it into another bike, cheaper bike cover or whatever that nonsense was. But I mean, you're talking. All jokes aside, it is the department's name, and it's misspelled, and it's in a brass signage, so it wasn't cheap.
There was another one, the aforementioned Albert Dolan, the young Fianna Fáil TD, who I'm rapidly becoming a massive fan of. TD for Galway East, by the way, not Galway West. So his constituency is not where the by-election
He is Fianna Fáil though, John. You're such a political slut, really.
I back good people in all parties. I think there are good people in a lot of the parties. There are certainly good people in Fianna Fáil, and there are certainly good people in Fine Gael. And there are very dissatisfied people in both as well. I mean, where do you think I get half my stories? Anyway, the point is that Albert Dolan revealed in public this week that An Post received €30 million last year from the Department of Health. Do you know why they got €30 million from the Department of Health? That's how much the Department of Health spent on stamps last year to send people letters about their medical appointments. 30 million quid. And this is in the age of emails and text messages and everything else. They spent 30 million quid on stamps. And then you wonder, by the way, why you're not getting a tax cut. I understand, by the way, 30 million quid, not an awful amount of money in the context of tax cuts, but I suspect that An Post are being heavily propped up by state subsidy on things like that. And so incidentally,
but is a stamp not a euro? Is a stamp not a euro? Does that mean that the HSE sent 30 million letters?
Well, that wouldn't surprise me. First of all, it wouldn't surprise me if they did. That's what that works out 6 letters per citizen. Yeah, I can kind of see that, given that some people will have multiple conditions. But then they presumably got an industrial sized franking machine as well somewhere. But then the other departments will all have those as well, and the county councils. I mean, the amount of money that the state is spending in total on An Post every year must be eye-watering. Has to exceed well over 100 million.
Well, fair play to Albert Dolan.
Yeah. So that is it. That is the state of the country. Sarah and I talked about it. This was not a very structured podcast. I feel we rambled and kind of went all over the place. But I kind of feel like that's how the Irish political week was. It was kind of a week of rambling and musing and talking.
But also, I mean, there was a presidential campaign election on Friday. Count was on Saturday. It's now Thursday evening, as people know we record. There was a bank holiday weekend. There was a heave no against Micheál, and then Micheál multiple interviews. Like it's just been one of those weeks where it's kind of all over the place. Every day there's a new thing.
Yeah. Well, that will probably be, hopefully next week is more structured. In the meantime, Sarah and I will let you go and wish you a happy Halloween. And remind you to keep your dogs safe on Friday night if you have them, from all the children letting off fireworks. And in the meantime, have a wonderful time. We'll be back next week, as we always are. From Sarah and from me, that was the week that really was. We'll see you soon.